Garrosh Hellscream is the worst villain in WoW history, committing countless war crimes during his short reign as War Chief or the Horde. So if Garrosh Hellscream was taken into our world and convicted of all his crimes, what would his punishment be? So in this video, I have compiled a list of every crime he has committed in the games, in the books, and the cinematics. I will be covering them by sentence severity, starting with the smallest crime,
Watch your mouth, bitch!
and ending with some of the worst crimes in history, which would give him a seat at the Nuremberg trial. I have put a lot of effort into this video, so like, subscribe, and enjoy. Starting off with the smallest crime he has committed, criminal threats. Garrosh Hellscream has threatened Vol'jin multiple times in both the books and the games, even going so far to almost killing Vol'jin in an assassination attempt during the Mist of Pandaria expansion. Cause a simple disagreement where Vol'jin wanted to be more passive and Garrosh Hellscream wanted to attack and establish a stronghold in Pandaria.
Don't talk back to me, troll. You know who was left in charge here.
There be no question why, Garrosh. He gave you the title because you be grandson. I think you be more like your father than you thought, even without the demon blood.
After the minor disagreement, Garrosh threatened to kill him and then even attempted it. Because he tried to kill him, the threats are counted as illegal even if you have freedom of speech. For the criminal threat, he can get a maximum sentence of a $10,000 fine. But that is not the only crime he committed. Later in this video, I will show you how Garrosh used biological weapons, committed genocide, and attacked civilians for no reason. Garrosh Hellscream has committed thousands of crimes, but one of the smallest ones might surprise you. Escaping from prison is a crime. When he was held in the Temple of the White Tiger while they were holding trial for his war crimes. In the book with a very creative title, War Crimes, he escaped with the help of Wrathion, Kairos, and warlord Zayla, the chief of the Dragon Maw clan. With the help of the Time Dragon, he escaped into the past, creating the Iron Horde in an alternate timeline and sending them to attack Azeroth. Even though he was kinda passive in the plan up till the point of escaping, he is still responsible because he is complicit in the escape attempt, which will give him a maximum sentence of 5 years in prison, which is very little compared to the next crime on the list. When Garrosh sent his Krorkron bodyguards to attack people for disagreeing with him. In the War Crimes book, the mushroom seller Koris Oe insulted Garrosh and his plans, and then Garrosh sent the Krorkron to beat him up, where at that point they beat him to a pulp, leaving the store. Even if he did not directly beat him, he is still responsible for the attack on this individual. Because he is the one ordering it, he will still be charged. And because of this attack, he will receive a charge of 10 years in prison for battery assault. A very serious crime. During the Wrath of the Lich King expansion, Garrosh challenged Thrall to a Makura, a duel to the death, over a disagreement of war tactics, where Garrosh wanted a more aggressive approach, attacking both the Horde and the Scourge, while Thrall wanted a more diplomatic one, where he teamed up with Alliance, fighting the Scourge together. Because they couldn't find common ground, it infuriated Garrosh, where at that point he challenged Thrall, the War Chief, to a Makura, a duel to the death, and then fighting in the Ring of Valor. But halfway into the Makura, the Lich King attacked Orgrimmar, interrupting them and ending the fight early, ending with no one being dead. So together, they teamed up, they fought away the Scourge, attacking the city, where at that point, Garrosh agreed with Thrall's diplomatic approach. Because Makura is a duel to the death, and duels are illegal even if both parties consent to the fight. It is still, and it will be counted as attempted murder, because both of them agreed, and none of them got seriously injured. I will give them a sentence of 15 years in prison. Garrosh Hellscream has made more than one attack against normal people. For example, when he attacked the Razor Hill Inn, using the Krorkron and himself even being there. Inside the inn was a blood knife, Keller Bloodblade of the Blood Elves. I know, a lot of bloods, and a forsaken captain who previously critiqued him for his bad war tactics. First, Garrosh walked into the bar, confronting the two people for not agreeing with his war tactics, and insulting them to their face, and then, after leaving, the whole thing set ablaze, but not focusing on the two killings. Simply the fact that they burned down the bar will be 20 years in prison for arson. And on top of that, they killed 2 innocent people, which will count as double homicide, because he's the one who started the fire that killed them both. And that is simply assuming the bar was empty and these 2 people were the only one in there, saying The barkeeper and everyone else was moved out before that happened. Because this was double homicide, he will usually receive a lifetime in prison for each murder. 2 lifetimes in prison added to his sentence. And going off Americans, the average lifetime in America is 77 years, so the 2 lifetimes in prison will be 152 years total. But going back a bit, after Garrosh threatened to kill Vol'jin, he actually went through with it and sent his Kor'kron assassins to kill him for the repeated challenges to Garrosh's authority and battle tactics. And once again, he's the one ordering it and planning it out. So he sends Vol'jin away on a mission together with the player and the Kor'kron, where at that time the Kor'kron tried to kill him. But luckily, we have the player and he's OP, so he protects Vol'jin's life. He survived, so this wasn't turned into a murder and only counted as an attempted murder. But the problem with attempted murder, it has about the same sentence as normal murder, because you're still intending to kill them, even though you didn't succeed. They usually see it as equally as bad. So with the full context, I will give him a life sentence for this attempted murder. Zooming out for a second, and adding everything together, already he has a 209 years in prison, $335,000 fine, and even 1 death sentence. This early into the video. Later in this video, this number will go up so much more. But going back for a second, we need to talk about the time Garrosh Hellscream beat the crap out of Anduin when he was just a child.
Die, whelp!
During the Mist of Pandaria campaign, Garrosh had gotten his hand on a legendary Pandarian artifact, the Bell, which he was going to use as a weapon against the Alliance and the Pandas.
We are the Horde! We are slaves to nothing and no one! With the Divine Bell, I will burn away any remnants of weakness within us. Fear, despair, hatred, doubt. The lesser races are buried beneath their weight. But we will control their power. Together, we will destroy the Alliance and claim what is rightfully ours. Let our song of victory begin!
Out of nowhere, Anduin, the Prince of Stormwind, appeared, and Anduin was such an irritation to Garrosh. He punched him in the gut, throwing him into the bell, breaking it into 1,000 pieces, almost killing Anduin and breaking a lot of his bones.
Garrosh attacked my son?
He's alive, but his bones are shattered.
Send for Velen. Bring him here at once.
My king, I promise you, the Kirin Tor will come down on Garrosh so hard his ancestors will reel. Blood will pay for blood!
But luckily, we live in a fantasy world, so use some healing spells and got him back together. Even if Anduin is extremely punchable, beating up children is still a crime. So justified or not, Garrosh Hellscream punching and almost killing Anduin could give him a sentence up to 20 years in prison and a fine about $100,000 for the extreme medical cost of healing him after breaking so many bones. But going back a bit to all the people Garrosh has murdered, starting with Terran Bloodhoof in the Ring of Valor. After challenging Garrosh to a mock run, a duel to the death, not surprisingly, because it's war tactics, Garrosh kills Bloodhoof in the duel. As already established, a duel to the death is illegal, it will count as murder, adding another life sentence on top of his case. Moving on to the next one, during his campaign in the Stone Talon Mountains, one of the Horde overlords has sent a bombing to attack a grove purely consisting of civilians. And after the attack, the war chief Garrosh turns up and tosses the overlord off the mountain, killing him.
War Chief, I was carrying out your command!
My command was my command to murder innocents, Kromgar. I sent you into Stone Talon Mountains with an army. Your orders were to secure this land for the Horde. You laid waste to the land, murdered innocents, children even. A wise old war hero told me something that I would carry with me forever. Honor, Kromgar. No matter how dire the battle, never forsake it. Overlord Kromgar, have disgraced the Horde. By my right as War Chief, I hereby relieve you of duty. You are dismissed!
Even if the Overlord was committing war crimes, human rights has deemed every man deserves his day in court, and simply executing him on the spot is illegal and will count as murder. Although the commander was committing war crimes, a bit more justified, but still count as murder, and he will receive a life sentence for that. And in military court, they usually have harsher punishments, probably also giving him the death sentence. Now moving on to the times, Garrosh broke international law during the Cataclysm expansion by illegally invading Ashenvale and starting a war against the Night Elves. Also attacking and raiding peaceful villages, committing countless war crimes against them. The war is even the reason Karen Bloodhoof decided to duel Garrosh in a mock hurrah, resulting in his death. But back to the unlawful invasion of a country, comparing it to real-life examples. Like when Germany invaded Poland in World War II, most of the German leadership, who were not responsible for any other crimes, got convicted for the illegal invasion, facing death sentence or life in prison. So going off real-life examples, he's getting the same, but staying in Ashenvale. Garrosh ordered explicit attacks against civilians in the zone. Unfortunately, in the book, there were no explicit numbers on how many people he killed. In the adventure books for World of Warcraft, Ashenvale has about 5,670 Night Elves living there. And assuming 5% of the civilian population died during the attacks, that's about 283 dead Night Elves. And because he's the one ordering the attacks on the civilians and making sure the Korkron and the Horde soldiers carry them out, he will be charged for the murder of all of them. So he will receive 283 life sentences, and on top of that, 1 death sentence. Continue to talk about Garrosh's mass murders. In the Siege of Orgrimmar cinematic, you can see Garrosh's victims he killed for disagreeing with him.
Anyone who would rise against my new Horde will be impaled upon the spires of Orgrimmar!
In the footage, we can see 15 people put on spikes. We can assume there is more, we can't confirm that. So we will add the charge of killing 15 more people and 15 more life sentences. In the same raid, the Siege of Orgrimmar, we can find even more civilians died because of Garrosh's wrath. Some pinned up on walls, some forced to fight each other for the lives of their children. 5 Fairmore citizens and 1 troll, adding 6 more murders to his sentence. Also, in the Siege of Orgrimmar raid, when 2 of the women who were captured by the orcs were fighting each other, she was referencing she wants her children to be freed, assuming there were multiple children, and also going with a lower estimate, saying she has 2 children. Garrosh will have 2 sentences for child kidnapping and endangerment. For double child kidnapping, you can get a death sentence and life in prison. So let's apply both. And also in the same raid, you can find 6 goblins tied up and used as target practice for the Horde. And for that, he must face torture charges against the goblins, and on top of that, kidnapping or even taking them there. And also in the raid, you can find the goblins forced to dance for Garrosh's army. You can find trolls and humans forced to be in cages, and a panda almost getting executed. Plus the 2 children, adding altogether 20 kidnapping charges in a single raid. And the usual kidnapping will have 20 years in prison. So together, 20 times 20 is 400 years in prison. One of the worst and most disgusting crimes committed by Garrosh, which he was charged with in the War Crimes book. Because his association and support of the Dragon Maw clan in the book, and earlier in his campaigns, and his continued use of the dragons, which resulted in this action, and he did not apologize or disapprove of this. In the book, they explain how Necros Skullcrusher enslaved Alexstrasza to have dragon children to build up their army, but luckily Alexstrasza was able to escape later from their custody. In the book, they explain Garrosh Hellscream will not only be charged with forced impregnation, and also enslavement, torture, abuse of children, and killing prisoners who were also children. And once again, we meet the problem, we don't know how many prisoners or dragons he enslaved or killed. For enslavement, of Alexstrasza, he will receive death penalty plus life in prison. And for the enslavement of children, and let's assume there were 100 of them, that's 100 lifetimes in prison. For the child abduction, that's 20 years times 100, and for the main charge, death penalty. During the Cataclysm, Garrosh Hellscream teamed up with the Blood Elf to steal focusing iris from the blue dragonflight, and with the help of the goblins, they turned it into a mana bomb, a very powerful weapon. By the pre-patch of Pandaria, Garrosh got his army together to send them into attack on Faramore. The Alliance sent their fleet to evacuate the city and pouring in hundreds of soldiers to defend it, and a large portion of the Alliance forces were all focused into that place. The goblins flew above the city, dropping the bomb, destroying it entirely, killing thousands of civilians and soldiers. In the adventure books, they explain the original population of Faramore was about 13,000. Because they only had a couple of weeks to evacuate the city, the Horde even came surrounding it and blocking off naval access. Let's assume half the population were able to escape. That is 6,500 civilians dead from indiscriminate bombing, which is a war crime. And some, the survivors, were even kidnapped by the Horde and taken to Orgrimmar as slave labor, as we already saw in the Siege of Orgrimmar raid, where we can find Faramore's citizens. Simply assuming everyone died, that's 6,500 life sentences plus a death penalty, and probably an additional death sentence for the indiscriminate bombing of the city. By the end of Garrosh Hellscream's reign as war chief, he had done tons of war crimes, but one of the most notable ones, to first imprison the trolls and throw them into ghettos, and then sending them off to the Echo Isles in the south of Durotar. Because Garrosh believed the Horde is only for the orcs, and he wanted to remove all the other people and races in the faction. That's also one of the reasons Garrosh tried to murder Vol'jin in an assassination attempt in the Mist of Pandaria. Later in the final patch, when Garrosh took full control over the Horde, the Dark Spear Rebellion started, where all the trolls teamed up to fight against Garrosh, together with the rest of the Horde and the Alliance, trying to free the oppressed trolls, and eventually succeeding, for the crime of putting the trolls in ghettos and trying to remove them, and even going as far as killing them. Once again, going off the statistics from the adventure books, 1,820 trolls living in Orgrimmar, and assuming everyone got removed, he'll receive one life sentence for each troll which was discriminated and murdered, adding up to a total of 1,820 life sentences for Garrosh Hellscream. And that's only counting the ones living in Orgrimmar. And the worst crime committed by Garrosh Hellscream was during the cinematic, where he dumped the heart of Yogg-Saron into the well in the middle of the zone, the Valley of the Eternal Blossom, the homeland of the Pandaren, destroying everything, murdering thousands of people, obliterating their main territory by spreading the evil from the heart, causing the damage for this whole zone single-handedly. The intentional destruction of Pandarian's native land and poisoning it with the heart of Yogg-Saron and the Shah was a deliberate attempt by the orcs. Even in the newer books set years after this event, they describe the land as completely destroyed, and it would take generations to even clean it out. A truly unrecoverable loss for their whole civilization. Together with Yogg-Saron's heart as a biological weapon, poisoning the lands and spreading disease, he will also be charged for genocide, for almost destroying, making it unlivable. And for both of these crimes, he will receive the death penalty and the cost of the destruction of the land and the large-scale evacuation which must follow. And the only big one I can compare this to is the destruction of Chernobyl, which was so devastating, making the land unlivable for generations, still destroyed today. The cost of the Chernobyl disaster was $700 billion. And reminding you, the Chernobyl thing was just one small city in Ukraine. Compared, the main part of the Pandarian civilization would be as if the Chernobyl disaster was in Kiev instead. One of the most important cities destroyed. So he will be charged with $700 billion, which is the same as the cost of Chernobyl. If Garrosh Hellscream got charged with every single crime he has committed, he would face a fine of $700,645,000, 17 death sentences, 405,925 years in prison. If you have a friend who thinks Garrosh did nothing wrong, send this to him and he might change his mind. Thanks for watching, like and subscribe.